The Little Minister is a 1934 film directed by Richard Wallace. This is written by Jane Murphy, Sarah Y. Mason, and Victor Heerman, based on the story by J.M. Barrie. Now, while I love J.M. Barrie, I haven't actually read this one, so I didn't know what to expect going into it. And of course, I can't compare it. If you have any thoughts on how it compares to Barrie's story, please feel free to let me know. But I can judge it purely on the film, and unfortunately, my judgment is that it's very slow and the accents are not brilliant. This is set in Scotland in the 1800s. And I'm not the kind of person, being Scottish, I'm not the kind of person who gets offended if somebody does a bad Scottish accent. I don't care. I don't mind in the slightest. But that doesn't mean that it's the easiest to listen to. Now, I'm not saying Katharine Hepburn's accent is bad, but I feel like whoever did the accent or dialect coaching for this film basically just said, roll your R's and that's all that matters. The amount of rolling is so heightened. It gets a little bit irritating, to be honest, and the accents are just not great. As I said, I'm not offended by it. I don't really care. I'm not good at doing accents, so I'd be a huge hypocrite, but it doesn't mean it's the easiest on the ears. As for the narrative, I found the narrative to be very slow and kind of dull, but our two protagonists are really interesting characters. So I didn't hate the film. I can't say that I hated it, but I do think it's way longer than it needs to be. And granted, they're basing it on Barrie's story, so if Barrie has a story of a certain length, then maybe they're not willing to chop it up too much. But I do feel like the pacing was very slow because it's about this little minister, as he's called in the village, played by John Beal, and he meets Babbie, played by Katharine Hepburn, and she's a very mysterious character, and I don't want to say too much about her in case you decide to watch it, but the way she presents herself is really interesting, and the accent aside, I think her performance, Katharine Hepburn's performance, was brilliant, and I did really like her character. I thought she was really fascinating. And Gavin, our little minister, is a really interesting, well-written character with a great performance as well. So I liked watching them on screen, whether they were together or acting with other people, but the actual events of the narrative were a little bit dull. It's partly about this relationship that grows between them. There are a couple of other things happening. Babbie also has a lot going on in her own life, but I don't want to say too much about that either. And it's fine. It's not great because of the length and the accents. The film is nearly 2 hours, and while in general I don't like long films, I don't mind them if that's how long the story takes to be told. But with this one, I feel like there's a lot of fluff, a lot of padding we could have removed. As I said, I assume that's what it's like with Barrie's story. I don't know. I haven't read it. I haven't seen it before. So maybe we can blame Barrie. But at the same time, there is definitely a lot we could remove from the film version without losing very much at all. Do I recommend it? Yes, if you're a fan of Hepburn or anybody else who's in it, or if you particularly like character-driven stories. I don't mind them, but I prefer narrative-driven stories, which seems like a stupid thing to say, but you know what I mean. Films where the character is the most interesting part and the events surrounding the character are secondary. And that's certainly what I feel we have here. There are key plot points, but I just didn't find them that interesting. So I'd recommend it if it sounds like something that would genuinely appeal to you for whatever reason. But if you're just looking for a good film recommendation, then The Little Minister is not going to be near the top of my list. And it's not encouraged me to read Barrie's version. So it's watchable. It's slow. The characters are great. The accents are not. I'd recommend it to some people, but it's certainly not going to appeal to everybody.